This is Eagle Freedom Presents Showtime.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Here's your host, Deston Rogers.
And welcome back to Eagle Freedom Presents. I am your host, Deston Rogers. Thank you very much for joining me. I got a question for you. Are you a special needs parent, or do you know someone who is? My guest today truly embodies our mantra of rise, inspire, and overcome. When Sandi Shaner's daughter was diagnosed with a rare disease, Sandi was faced with challenges that would test every fiber of her being. After an initial phase of denial, Sandi made a decision that would ultimately lead her to become an advocate for special needs parents and children. Sandi transformed her experience into a powerful mission and led her to write her best-selling and award-winning book, The Journey. She also is the founder of the nonprofit Carly's Cause. Would you please help welcome to the show, Sandi Shaner. Sandi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I tell you, we have had the opportunity to meet a while back and get to know each other a little while. And you really do. You truly have a story that is going to draw people in. And if you're listening to this, please take some time to really listen to this conversation, because I think everybody does know somebody, if they don't have one, know somebody who has a special needs child. But before we get into that, a little bit, it was interesting to meet you. Through our journey, we met up in Los Angeles at the Grove at Barnes & Noble. Had a good time to meet up there. But there's an interesting, There's an interesting connection that we didn't even know existed. And you brought it up. So I'm going to let you talk about it.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, it was about the age of 6, because I was born in New Jersey, right? And my parents came to California, my mom and my stepdad. They were hippies. They were hippies and they were on a journey and they took us with them. But we didn't really settle into the home life like a lot of people do. They were kind of more gypsy lifestyle. So we'd go to school from October to May and then go hit up the campsites and live there. And one of the campsites that we lived at, I believe when I was 7, was in Bishop, California. And right next to this campsite was a radio station. And while my brothers would go off to the golf course and collect golf balls, they made 25 cents per ball retrieved, I would go in the radio station and hang out every day. And then I find out later that you're actually from Bishop and you know all about that radio station.
Yeah, that when you told me that story, I was listening real close and wait a minute. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of funny. Now, we do want to say that this was a couple of years before I actually got to the radio station where I started anything. But that's kind of an interesting connection. And I just want to bring that because it's really interesting that the similarities a little bit of being at the radio station. So that's awesome. Let's dive into what we're here to talk about. That's, of course, the journey, the book, and the journey of everything. At 14, correct me if I'm wrong, at 14, you were living on the streets of Southern California, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like at that time for you growing up on the streets of LA by yourself?
It wasn't LA, it was San Diego. But yes, so like I said, my parents were hippies. By the time I was 11, my stepfather had moved away. And my mother really dived into using methamphetamine. And I'm sure just hearing that one word, everybody's going, oh, right? Because there's no way out. That is definitely a road down. But she started her pathway in and out of jail here and there. And then when I was 14, she had her first big arrest, went to her first prison term, and I was on my own. And if I continued to go to school, they would catch me and put me in a foster home, and I didn't want that. So what I did was I was, couch surfing from friend's house to friend's house while I went and got a fake ID don't worry, this all came out in the end. I'm not giving any secret information. But back then, living at the border, fake IDs were kind of hard, you know, to get unless you know somebody, but I did.
Right.
They made me an ID that said I was 18 years old, and then I took a little pen, scraped off the last four digits of my social security card and wrote in new ones. And I went and got a job at a place called Fiesta Twin Cinemas. And I told them I was 18 and very quickly promoted to management, where I was carrying big old envelopes at the age of 14 to the bank every night at midnight and riding my bicycle back down to Imperial Beach, which was where I lived. And I had rented a room from a guy that was in the Navy, and he was gone a lot. He was out to sea a lot, sometimes for 6 months at a time. And so I had my own apartment most of the time. Like,
It's quite a journey that you had to go through just starting off your life. Let me ask you, how did that experience shape your future?
well, you know, a lot of what I had to do back then because I couldn't go to school was be self-taught, right? I had to learn everything on the fly. I like to use this quote, you bounce off your butt, you land on your feet, and you keep running because the best is yet to come. Never take something that just hits you and think that you need to stay down. And even at a young age, I knew that. And so I just kept going. I kept doing what was right in front of me. I would go and I needed to learn about balancing a bank account and all these other things. So I would go into the library and I would open up books and read about accounting. I stayed away from algebra. We'll talk about that another day. Algebra makes me cry, but I would learn anything that I needed to learn to apply to life. And I basically taught myself a whole 4 years of high school. And then I went in because I wanted to go to college at the age of 18, and I took the proficiency exam. Back then, that was the step higher than the GED, and I scored a 97% overall just from
Wow.
self-study. So that is the biggest takeaway from being forced to live in that environment is that you can take control of it. You can become resilient and you can change your own outcome. You just have to put the work in.
And so after all of this, how do you have your first daughter, your daughter
Mhm.
Kelly. Tell us about life. You have her daughter at that point. What's going on with you at that point in your life?
Well, when I was 18, I did end up getting pregnant. Father was not going to take ownership of the child. And so I did on my own. At the time, my mom had gotten back out of prison and she was dealing methamphetamine again. You know, I moved in with her because I missed my mom, but I didn't miss the loud knocks at the door at 5 o'clock in the morning and the raids that were happening. And it was to the point where me and my oldest brother would just lay flat on the ground with our hands behind our back because we knew they were coming. We'd hear them. And we were just like, okay, here we go, you know. But this one time, it wasn't a small raid, it was a big one. And that was the one that sent her away for a while. And while I was pregnant with Kelly, I was spending my days supporting her at her trial. Think about that for a minute. You know, I'm not really preparing for a baby. Um, so I had to do some things to pivot from that lifestyle once again and pull myself up and rise above the challenges. And so I just went to school for automotive technology. I was going to be a mechanic. I was good at using my hands and I self-taught myself a whole bunch of stuff. And I ended up graduating with an associate's degree and becoming a mechanic for many years. But the thing was, I wanted to work on race cars and I ended up working on taxis. Can you imagine that? Ugh. So,
Bit of a difference, but they do both race around. So
well, you know, and then I was working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I have this brilliant mind and I'm just doing repetitive things, right? So eventually I was starting to not want that life anymore. It was 2002 and I'm in the ladies' room at the automotive shop and a rat this big, bigger than my head, starts walking by me. I'm done. No more, no more, you know. And so I just walked away from that industry and I started to look at what white collar people do, right? Like, how can I get out of this? Um, I went and got a job at a mortgage event company, and I wanted to learn about real estate and loans and finances and things like that. And I just took a left turn. I had to get out. But with Kelly, she went along with this. It was a living for her. It was a living that supported her. I had her when I was 19. By the time I got out of automotive, I was 27. But it's so funny. She was so supportive of me that when I did the job change, I quit my job in November, and we had no money for Christmas or anything like that. But I did get the job, and I was going to start on January 31st. So I'm a musician, and I took my guitar and I took her and I taught her how to play percussion. And we went down on the corner of Fifth and Market in downtown San Diego before they stopped people from busking. And we would just busk. I'd make like $40 an hour every night. And it was cold and it was rainy. And people would see me out there, a young girl with her kid performing music, and they would just stop their car, their limousine, and drop money into our bucket. And then they wouldn't even listen to the songs. But I taught her 10 songs, and we did that every night until I started this new career. She was always very supportive of everything that I did.
How old was she at this time?
9.
9 years old.
Yeah.
You're getting into the music industry.
She was good. She put her little bandana on and be like, bum, 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 dun, 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 playing her drums and percussion and tambourine while I'm jamming on guitar, singing.
So
yeah, we made it work.
So everything's, you're making everything work. Everything's going great.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens next?
Well, when I met Carly's father, that was like a really good time. I advanced in my career so much. I was making really good money. I left Mortgage Marketing Group and started my own event company, and I was traveling all over, and I helped, real estate investors put on guru events and all kinds of really high-end stuff, and life was good. So I'd been dating her father for about 5.5 years, and all of a sudden I was pregnant. Unexpected. Yeah. Whoa, wait, I'm pregnant again. And Kelly had just given birth the same month that I found out I was pregnant. Right. So she had my first grandson, David, and Carly was going to be younger than him.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was kind of an exciting time. And I just looked at her father and said, we've been together a long time and I'm pregnant. You think we should get married? Like give her a proper, mother, father, married, your last name, all that stuff. And he's like, yeah. So we planned this wedding and put everything into planning this wedding. I had this small budget, but I had all these favors I called in. And so I put together this amazing event. And then 3 days before the wedding, I went in to find out the sex of the baby. And when I was in there, she said, okay, so here. You could see this part here to here in the x-ray. And she said that this and everything back was missing. There's a big giant hole there. That meant that she was going to have a cleft lip and palate. And then she said, by the way, it's a girl. I'm like, okay. She goes, well, I need to ask you, would you like to make arrangements to terminate the pregnancy?
No.
I'm like, what? No. That's all I said was no. No, no, no. Not doing that. I couldn't believe she even asked that. And I'm like, okay, so tell me about this cleft palate thing. I didn't really know anything about that. My head was wrapped up in money back then. And so I had to learn, She said, well, it requires multiple surgeries. They could end up looking different. I go, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. No. But I couldn't really go beyond that brief conversation to do any deep dives because I had an event to put on. So I got a dress I've got to fit into. Now I keep growing every day and I had to get edits and I had all these family flying in from different parts of the country and had to make accommodations for them. And so I didn't think about it. I just did the wedding and I had a great wedding. But the day after the wedding is when it sunk in. Um, Started to do some research. And did you know Matthew McConaughey had a cleft lip?
I did not know.
Yeah.
Did
And
not know that.
Joaquin Phoenix, look how
Wow.
good they look. And, the challenges I thought I was going to have was going to be based on speech, or they might have in their speech. And I'm like, that's no reason to kill a kid. I'm sorry to say it that way, but it just stuck with me that a cleft palate would be a reason to terminate a pregnancy. It just didn't, as a mom who already has a little girl, I wasn't going to do that. Um, but over time, I got to know very well that we could handle it. It's 19 years of surgeries. There's, some plastic stuff. You have to get involved in nonprofits and work with them because insurance doesn't cover everything. But then you look at Joaquin Phoenix and you say, okay, I got this. I can do it. It's going to be okay.
She ends up having the surgery.
Hmm.
What is she still under a year old when she has the surgery?
The first surgery for the lip, yes. So she goes in and she has the lip repaired. And you can see in the photos that the before, where the lip was like a little ball hanging out here, and then after, where it's kind of like that. It's kind of a telltale that they've had that surgery. It just flattens it a little. But she was so cute. She's got these big blue eyes and she's super funny, her hair was like this long when she was born. Wouldn't
Wow.
stand up straight, like that. She's just really adorable. But at the time that we had that surgery, when the doctor came out, I was like, okay, how'd it go? And she goes, well, everything went great. But, and I can
But
tell you right now, you don't ever want to hear your doctor say, but, okay? There was a little tiny white dot on the tip of her nose, and I didn't think anything of it. But what it was is a dermoid cyst. So a dermoid cyst is a cyst like this, right? That will grow all these legs in multiple directions and plant new tumors. And it
hmm,
was dangerously close to the brain. So they wanted to do some tests. They said, okay, we're going to do a CT scan. All right, we need to do an MRI. We need another CT scan. We need another MRI. The 10 months of this go by. And that thing went from being that big to this big on the tip of her nose. And it had, I think the delays in waiting might have led to this, but I don't know for sure. But it had went into and penetrated the brain barrier. So they
wow.
had to do brain surgery.
And how old is she now when she's having brain surgery?
17 months old.
17 months. So now this is surgery
Six,
number two.
16 months, sorry. Yeah, the second surgery, 16 months.
Now,
And
I was going to say, you always hear stories of those who undergo surgeries, brain surgeries. Something doesn't come right. You hear a lot of times when they come back. Did you experience something like that with Carly?
anytime you open up the brain and expose oxygen to it, something's going to change, especially if you're poking around with instruments. Um, I did the same thing with this surgery as the last one. I had, Christmas was coming up and they called me up and they're like, well, we have to do brain surgery. And so you have to give blood. You have this, you have to do that, you have to do this, you have to do that. I had all these things. And I was right in the middle of entertaining family and putting on the Christmas festivities. And so I didn't deal with those emotions. I didn't see how they would serve me at the time. And this is a problem with parents. If you're starting to see a little bit of a trend, this trend is called denial. And it's a safe place that we go in our head. But here's what happened. When they took the baby from me and the doors closed, I lost it. I went running out of that hospital, full speed ahead, screaming. I'm sure, I don't remember, but people were looking at me funny when I came back. So I assume I made noise. But I ran, it was probably a quarter mile to my car. And I got to my car and I just shut the door and I had a minute to scream. And that's what you want to do when you go in denial and you hide your feelings. And then all of a sudden they rear their ugly head. And I just took a breath in and I screamed louder than I've ever screamed in my life. And then I'm like, no more. And I wanted to scream again, but the second scream didn't happen. I went somewhere. I don't even know where. I don't know who led me there. Some spiritual entity. It had to be, because I saw Carly and she was 19 years old. And at the time, Carly was a 0 percentile. But in this vision, she had a big butt. In this vision, she had freckles and she was looking off like this. It's very common of children with autism, but I didn't have an autism diagnosis. Now I'm telling you this story because I wrote this story in 2012 in a book authored by Greg Reed called The Rise. It's there in writing. Today, Carly's 16 and she has a big butt, which I don't have. And she has freckles, which I do. So there's something to this vision. It did happen. It was so brief. But the only thing I got from it at the time was seeing her. All the rest of it over the years, I've learned more. But in that moment, the only thing I needed to know was that I seen her at 19. She wasn't going to die. She's going to be 19. So I got out of my car and I walked back and I'm looking at people, and like I had makeup here. I had to wipe all that off. I looked like Alice Cooper, but I had to wipe that off. And as I'm walking, people are going, you okay? They all wide-eyed like that. I got back to my husband and he was the worst. He's going, is everything okay? And I go, yeah, Harley's 19. Okay. I explained to him later what had happened, but at the time he chose to not talk.
Right.
Not talking to you. That's what you want to say. You go ahead. But I told him that I saw her and she was beautiful and everything's going to be okay. I told him later the story. And, that was not the only brain surgery she had. She had another one at the age of 3. When she was 4, we went in to get the cleft palate surgery done. And when we brought her home because of her autism, she's like that. And then end up pulling the whole surgical area out. She lost a lot of blood. I had to rush her to the hospital. When I handed her over, they were talking blood transfusions and stuff and putting her in a coma. And I remember hitting the ground and then stopping and saying, no, Carly's 19. And I got right back up on my feet. And I just embraced the situation and took control of it. She spent time in that forced coma. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's very scary. And every time something happens to her, I resort back to that statement, Carly's 19. And a lot of people who know me and support me, they'll say it to me if they see me failing.
Let me ask you, you went through a lot, obviously. This is just tremendous, just what you've gone through to this point. What was your husband's reaction at the time? Was he withholding too? Was he hiding everything? How did he handle everything? And how did that affect your relationship?
Well, the relationship didn't make it past the age of 3. It was just, we were not talking, we were not getting along, sleeping in different rooms. Everything was annoying about each other. And in order for me to be able to care for that child, I needed to not have multiple variables happening. I don't know if there's a better way to explain it, but he was a good husband and he's a good father. It's just that we were not clicking anymore because the stress was too much. So we agreed to separate and he moved a mile away. And he's been in her life ever since, and we are good co-parents and we're good friends and we still rely each other on certain business things, but we're just not husband and wife. Although sometimes we act like it, but we're not.
Well, I think anybody listening or watching this can understand how much pressure that would add to a relationship. At some point in this, there was a point when Carly became nonverbal. Tell us about that.
He was starting to say certain words, and when you have a cleft palate, your soft palate, the g, those things, they're non-existent. But once the palate was repaired, her baby babbling went from mum to g, but speech never formed. After that second brain surgery, the second one, the tumor was, this is one of the tumors they didn't get out, and it grew. It grew to be like that big, an inch and a half back from right here in the Broca's area near the Wernicke area, which is areas of the brain that process speech and help you to create speech. But ironically, if I sing something to her, which is a different area of the brain, she's able to receive it and respond. So we did create a language, but the language around my house is different. Brush, brush, brush your teeth, play that handy game. That's how I say, Carly, it's time to brush your teeth. Night, night, Carly. Night, night, Carly. That's time to go to bed. If you say, go brush your teeth or go to bed, she has no clue what you're saying. But if you sing it and the song is familiar and paired with the action, then she knows exactly what you're saying. She has intelligence, but it's limited by her inability to process speech.
Wow. That's amazing. What's really cool about that is you learn how to communicate through music.
Yes.
That is amazing. And this actually plays into a role later on as you're going into the school system as well. What's happened? So she's going through all this. She's lost nonverbal communication now. Where's life at now when all this is going on?
Well, we were able to get an autism diagnosis. And even though later on down the road, what she has is not exactly autism, autism is a symptom that is paired with other symptoms she has. And I can tell you, a lot of people are afraid of that diagnosis, but it changes everything. It gives you the support that you need. And even if your child grows out of it later, don't worry. At least you got that early intervention. We were able to get in and start having therapies, get her an iPad, start teaching her how to use the iPad to communicate and to find things that she enjoys. She seemed to come back to life once she had the iPad. And we started Carly's Cause because of the remarkable things that I saw with the iPad and her development. I set up a nonprofit with the help of the founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation, Frank Shankwitz, with Greg Reed, founder of Secret Knock and author of all the Think and Grow Rich books of today. And also Ron Klein. He's the inventor of the magnetic strip on credit cards and the multiple listing service for real estate. They helped me to build a nonprofit and to serve my community because they saw something in me. And so they trained me and we did that. And we gave out, I think within our first 3 months, we gave out 90 iPads to children with autism.
Oh,
And then we were also able to create iPads for teachers. We'd go into a campus with 8 iPads for that school, and then we'd do a training of their teachers and staff. And we'd pack them full of books of different types of apps and teach them about what apps create what skills. And then, so our iPads for teachers was to go, into the classrooms. Because a teacher back then, this is prior to the pandemic, they would take 6 months to get a grant just to put an iPad in their classroom. And I'd walk in with 8.
amazing.
Right? I'd get the
Yeah.
donors and be like, no, we're not, you guys don't understand. My child is coming back to me. You need to be part of this for all children. But Carly's struggles didn't stop there. She had seizures, and those are scary. The first ones were only in the bathtub, which is really weird. And so they had her on a medication, but it wasn't really helping them. And then later on, every kind of epilepsy snuck in. She has scoliosis. She has hypotonia where, when a child cannot turn themselves over because of core strength is low and they don't walk or crawl right away. She had all those developmental milestones that she was not meeting. She didn't even walk until she was 4. So the reason why is the brain doesn't make connections to the core nerves and muscles. And that's hypotonia. So that was another thing that happened. But when she did start walking, she took multiple steps at once, right? Didn't just take one step. She walked 100 steps looking for some other preschool kids that she wanted to play with, right? So like once with her, once a connection is made, she would have something happen that was amazing. And that always kept me in a state of hope, right? That doctors are wrong about you. Look at you go, right? Is that hope though, or is that still partially denial?
Mhm. Well, I think for you, you mentioned, of course, that you had this vision from
Yeah.
years ago when she was a child. So, and you said you kept running that through your mind. What, since you brought up school and the education system, what was that like dealing with the schools with your child, with Carly?
Well, when I put Carly in school, every time I would talk about something amazing that was happening, their response was, "Oh, we're not seeing that here." After you hear that a bunch of times, you really want to punch somebody. I'm just being honest. Any parent who knows what I'm talking about, I'm right. You get frustrated. It's like, come on, what do you mean you're not seeing that there? Are you not trying to get her to do these things? You're just telling me that I'm full of it and your documentation will never show that she's making these strides. What it is, I think, though, with the schools is that you really need to understand your document. You need to know the difference between what it is you want for your child and what the school can actually provide so that will start to alleviate that need to punch somebody. Okay. It'll take away that frustration. They are there to provide academic services, and they can include in special education things like teaching them how to feed themselves and how to potty train, right? But they're not there to advance therapeutic services. They do bring in therapists that are on that IEP team, and they're going to work on the fine motor movements, the ability to navigate a screen, pick up Cheerios, little things like that. Where Carly, she lost feeling in her hands, and so that took a lot of therapy for her to be able to do that. But they're not there to fix your child. And if you're living in denial and you're not fully aware of what that IEP document is, you're constantly going to feel frustrated and want to take them from one school to another. You're not going to want to stay the course and see where the growth happens. But there are ways that you can advocate for yourself and you can get those services. And I do cover that in the journey and also in this course that I'm building that will be available online in 2026.
You actually took it a step further in that you became an instructor, right? You a special needs teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I had already earned my bachelor's in psychology at San Diego State. And the whole reason I did that was because I just needed to know what was going on with my daughter. I had walked away from all that money I was making to an extent to be able to go back to school because nobody would give me answers. Or was it also, I didn't like the answers they were giving me. So I went and got the same education that they have so that I could know for myself. And then when I went to get my master's degree, I got right in. I had a really high GPA. I earned my master's at Arizona State in psychology, and I wanted to follow suit and go to University of Southern California. They denied my application. Blow to ego, right? I was like, so I call them up on the phone, and I'm not sure other students do that, but I'm a business person. And I go, okay, so why did you pass on me? And they said, well, the work you do in your nonprofit is good, but we don't feel that you're in front of the population that you want to serve with a doctorate. And I didn't take that as criticism. I took it as a challenge. So I went and got a teaching credential.
Well, why not? You've already been faced with a lot of challenges, so why not have another one, right?
So I went into the schools to become a mod severe and mild mod special ed teacher. I wanted to know. I started off as a substitute while I was doing my coursework, and I would only take jobs that were special ed. Oh boy, that does open your mind. Um, but the thing was, I was never really the educator on duty. I was the researcher and the parent looking for answers. And I realize now in hindsight that that was my mentality. I did teach, taught lots, and I can teach right now, but it wasn't where my heart was. My heart was to figure out, what are all these services you're offering my daughter, and how come she's not getting this, and why isn't that? What's this part of the IEP, and what is the team doing here, and why do you guys say this stuff behind the scenes, right? Like, it was even brought up by admin. She
Oh,
said, come to work as an educator, not a parent.
wow.
And I was
That
like,
had to have been shocking.
no, it was a realization I was not showing up as an educator. She was right. I was
Wow.
showing up as a parent looking for answers. And it's okay. It's where the space I needed to be in. But the good news, the other finger, right? Yeah, right there. Right there. I got into the University of Southern California the next time I applied. And so currently I'm in
Awesome.
their doctoral program. It was I had to go in the pit, right? Everybody has to do their pit time. I did it in special education.
So you've gone through all this journey. You've had to discover a lot of your own resources because there was a lot of resources for Carly. You
Hmm.
know, she's the child, so there's the resources there. But when it came down to the parent, and I think this is where the advocate starts to come in, is you weren't able to find the assistance, the resources that you needed as a parent. Is that where the advocacy part of this came into play?
It did during the pandemic. So, first of all, let's look at that day, March 14th, 2020. We all know that day. Something changed in your life too. At the time, I had just received the diagnosis of all diagnoses. Harley went and finally was able to get the genome and exome sequencing because prior to that, when it was recommended to me that there might be something genetic going on with her, the test was $25,000.
Wow.
Eventually, insurance covered it. And so she had it. And they came back at me with, she has something called DDX3X. And she's number 298 in the entire world to be identified with this syndrome. Number 298 in a globe filled with what, 7 billion people. Think about that.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we don't know the life expectancy. We don't really know anything. There is some research happening. Here's a Facebook group. Make sure you join them so you can talk to other parents. And by the way, will you sign this document? Because she's the only one that's been noted to have a brain tumor. I would like to publish a paper.
That's a lot to take in.
That was my diagnosis. Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, where do you think my brain stopped at? No answers, genetic proof, no longer able to sit in denial, and no idea of life expectancy. And you log on to these Facebook groups in these rare disease categories, and you see the postings where the parents are losing their children, and it fills you with fear. And I was way consumed. At night, for the first 2 weeks, all I could do, open a bottle of Chardonnay once she went to bed, and then I would drink myself into a state where I could sleep because I would just be crying, you know. As long as I was able to stay busy, I could stay strong. But when I'm alone in my thoughts, not a good place to be. That's where grief happens, right? The stages of grief. I now realize I could lose my daughter. I now realize the fight I've been fighting was not applicable to her, that she's not going to get better. It's documented that it's going to get worse. And when you're faced with that type of mentality, You don't bounce off your butt so easily. Instead, you land on your knees. And I did. And so for 2 weeks, every single night, I drank a full bottle of wine until it made me sick to do that. And so I stopped. Your body can't handle that type of drinking. Well, some people can, but those are called alcoholics. And I was just sick. So I stopped. And within a couple of days of actually letting my feelings happen, I gained some clarity. I realized, okay, world, you can't really do anything else to me, can you? Go ahead and try. But you want to raise your gas prices? Mm-mm, not going to bother me. You want to fire me from a job? I'll just get another one tomorrow. There's like nothing you could do to bring me down. I became bulletproof in that moment. And I've put a shroud of clarity around me. And all my decisions have been through that process of thinking ever since. Okay. Now her life needs to make sense. Why is this happening to her? And what can I do to make her, even being on this earth, mean something? So then we fast forward a little bit more because it was within 1 year, suddenly the world shuts down, right? On
Right.
March 14th, 2020. I'm no longer in the event business. I had been doing fundraising for research on DDX3X. That wasn't happening anymore because we can't have concerts. And after a while, I had to get Carly stable first and figure out education and everything else. But after a while, I started to wonder what was going on with the other parents. It's like, well, are they struggling here too? I started checking in on them. So I had all these parents that I'd given iPads to throughout the course of Carly's Cause, or parents that we had our music program with. It was a cool little program. We taught kids with autism to work well with other students, and we did a Beatles tribute band and stuff, but pandemic comes along, no singing, right? So all of those students and kids and parents that I had in the network, I started just reaching out to them. And I found out that people were struggling. They were not getting their services. You cannot do physical therapy over Zoom. You cannot do occupational therapy over Zoom. These kids with autism and attention deficits and, intellectual disability, they can't learn how to read and write over Zoom. Carly will walk up, she'll go, and then walk away to a Zoom call. All right, there's people, mommy's talking to the screen, there's people on there, I'll wave at them, and then she's gone. She won't sit for a minute. That model wasn't working for them. It might have worked for normal functioning children, but not them. So I started to put together educational topics. I created a meeting where we would meet every 2 weeks, and I would teach the parents something. I would bring on special guests, internet security for one, for children with autism. We brought on Greg Reed and had him pump up the parents, making them all, feeling like a little bit empowered. And we would talk about the IEP. We would talk about seizures. We would have moments where we'd shut the camera off, turn off everything, and say, okay, vent. And we would just let the parents have it out. And you really get to know in that moment who your army is.
Right.
It's other parents.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get together people who are going through similar experiences, when they realize that they can truly open up with their true feelings and not have to worry, about anything. It's just, we're here together for the same purpose. At what point did you decide that this book, The Journey, which is an amazing book, and I'm telling, for anybody out there who wants to learn about this process, get the book, The Journey. It's an easy read, but it really helps you understand what it's like to be a special needs parent and the work that you're doing, being an advocate. Tell us about this book and how this book came about.
It came about from talking to those parents. And so many of the original parents from the parent support group, what I did with the book was I interviewed them on Zoom and I got their stories and then just wrote it into an overall story, because the book is written in allegory. So it's a page turner. It's meant to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's growth for the characters. There's dialogue. It has a fictional sense, but it's nonfiction. So it's real content put in a parable. And in the beginning of the book, for the first 8 chapters, it's understanding what's in our heads and what we've been dealing with. But then you start to see some common themes, right? And draw like, wait a minute, Carly was going through something like this too. And I've noticed this and I've noticed that, right? And then all of a sudden, something unthinkable happens. A perfectly normal functioning boy, the son of a very famous person, is hit by a car. And suddenly, that very famous person, who is Greg Reed, becomes a special needs parent in the blink of an eye. Where all along throughout the book, everyone else found out at birth or in utero, in my case. And so Greg, in a like has a before and after reference, takes a totally different approach to managing his child's care. And he uses every modality that's out there outside of the hospital. He says it. The hospital saved my son's life, but it's the modalities that I used outside of the hospital that brought him back to functioning. His son was not supposed to come out of a coma for a year, they were thinking, if it ever. They weren't sure if he was going to walk again. They weren't sure if he was going to talk again. And I can tell you right now, he's at like 90% of where he was prior to the accident. And he's so cute. He's got a little girlfriend and they do these cute videos on social media together. And, he's 13 now. And this had just happened. And, but through the lessons that Greg had learned, I started the rest of the book, started interviewing experts. We interviewed Dr. Jerry Landman. She's an expert as a pediatrician whose husband is a geneticist, and they happen to be parents of Lucy, who has CDG, PGAP3. Now, we all get these weird numbers and letters. That's what I assume. There's over 10,000 variations of stuff like this. We get assigned a number. It's kind of, here, I have mine is tattooed right here on my arm. DDX3X, hers is PGAP3, and Damien's another character in the book. His is GET4, GET4, but these are identified as a genetic mutation or anomaly or something like that, or chromosomal problem. And so what Dr. Jerry Landman does is she breaks it down from a pediatrician's point of view. Now, this is something we've been needing, who's also a parent. Right? Teacher who's also a parent. I could teach you something. Pediatrician who's also a parent. And she lets us know that all of those diagnoses that you do get, like autism, intellectual disability, global developmental delay, they're given during the early child development so that you can get services. She lets us know that she has created a situation where she took her daughter's neurons and put them into the petri dish and was able to work with the DNA to repair the DNA, because before, the neurons were dying. After they did their scientific work, the neurons repaired themselves. And so she has found in the petri dish a way to cure her own daughter. Now, this is a driven woman. However, the support coming from NIH has been frozen on that technology. What she's also done, in the interview that you'll learn about, is she's created a shell that you can plug in any of the variations into that shell, and they should be able to repair themselves, right? So DDX3X could be plugged into the shell and save Carly's neurons from dying, because that's what happens with her. Her neurons do die. I taught her piano. She can't play piano anymore. We teach her a skill. Unless it's reinforced every single day, she loses it. It's like 50 First Dates, the movie. But with her, you have to have constant repetition to maintain anything in her brain. But wouldn't it be amazing if her research was funded to the point where we can improve Carly's functioning and maybe the functioning of all those other rare disease kids? So that's another thing we need to advocate for, is funding toward research like this. But later on in the book, we also touch on ABA therapy and what the importance of it is. For example, ABA therapy was created by B.F. Skinner. He's one of the top developmental psychologists of all time. And he created this therapy to address behavior at the source so that you don't have to institutionalize children. They could be taught to stay in the home. They can be taught to function in society and get jobs. And there's different levels of ABA therapy. The problem is, just like with any other organization or industry, there are some bad seeds, which is why I said you have to test them out. And if you don't like them, move on. Get another one. Eventually, you're going to find somebody that has it exactly right. There's sound healing. Lori Vreeland, we interviewed her, and she has epilepsy. So she was able to really break down, look, sound healing can happen, but you need to avoid certain sounds. So you test them under care. She did say this, which I found fascinating. 432 hertz. That's what the Beatles recorded all of their songs in. She said kids with autism will be perfectly safe and function better with that sound. And I saw that in the Beatles tribute band. I saw them being happy, socializing, increasing communication. So there is something to sound therapy, but is your doctor going to prescribe you sound therapy? No.
Probably not.
You have to find those modalities yourself. Health, nutrition, wellness. And the biggest lesson that I learned throughout writing the book is that we need to have an action plan for the parents. You cannot hand a diagnosis to a parent and not give them an action plan for their own family quality of life. Them, the siblings, the mom, the dad. What would have happened to my marriage if I was given any kind of support? What would have happened to the long stints of denial that I lived in if I was given a handbook or an online study course that gave me what I needed to put one foot in front of the other and keep going? I had to learn the hard way. So the most important reason why you would get this book is because in the end of the book is a 5-day action plan. After you learn all the lessons, you realize, hey, there is a way that you can thrive despite your circumstances. Do you mind if I read some of it?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so by the way, it's called The Journey Embracing the Extraordinary. I know it's a long title, but there's a gazillion journeys out there in print.
Right.
But this one is Embracing the Extraordinary, which is what you have to do. And the final chapter, chapter 14, is titled Embracing the Extraordinary. And I'll tell you, when I read the chapter out loud to all the parents in the parent support group, everybody was crying. We're all crying because finally we had a voice. That chapter was a collection of everybody's feelings. And it was, I think it's one of the most important things. But here's what the 5-day action plan is. So first of all, before you begin, you have to be able to acknowledge your emotions. And then by doing that, realize that you're grieving and that denial is not a place that you can stay in. You're going to be thinking maybe that diagnosis is wrong. The doctors don't know what they're talking about. And I don't have time to deal with this right now. I need to go do this other stuff. Doesn't that sound familiar? Oops, sorry, I keep hitting my mic. Here, I'll move over here. Once you can acknowledge that your feelings are completely legit and they're going to go through the 5 stages of grief, then you can start to focus on action. Day 1, connect with other parents who understand. You need to join a parent support group and reach out and say, hello, here I am. Here's my story. Let them surround you, whether it's online or in person. On day 1, just do it. Eventually, we're going to teach you how to build a parent support group that you'll meet in person. But for now, just get somebody other than the professionals in charge of the care of your child. On day 2, you're going to learn about federally funded programs. On day 3, you find the right therapist for the entire family. That's really important. Get on top of that right away. You want to organize your medical and legal documents. You want to focus on self-care and be prepared for the road ahead. And then following that, we introduce you to the online home study course that we're building right now. It'll be available the second month of 2026. And that is a 10-week stabilization course. But for right now, this is what you need. Denial and grief are not signs of weakness. They're natural responses to change. The key is not to let them keep you from moving forward. The sooner you get services, the better your child will be. Request them loud and clear. Yes. Do not be afraid of labels like autism. We mentioned Dr. Jerry Landman. Sometimes doctors give blanket diagnoses so that you can qualify for support and therapies while the medical researchers try to find answers. Take small steps every day that will help you gain clarity, find support, and create the best possible future for you and your child. You are not alone. You got this. And we are here to help. No matter where you are on your journey, having an army of parents to support you is one call or click away.
Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. This has been an enlightening and very educational interview. Before we end our interview, I thought it would be interesting if we could reach out to some parents, both that were non-special needs parents and special needs parents, reach out to them and field some questions that maybe you could answer for them. Are you up for that?
100%.
Okay.
Let me
Right.
wipe
Okay.
my eyes. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah. No worries. No worries.
Okay,
Okay.
back to analytic.
All
Here
right.
we go.
Here we go. So the first set of questions are for someone who's not a special needs parent. Okay. So the question is, do you have the freedom and support to set aside time for yourself?
I do have time for myself, and I spend that time playing in multiple tribute bands and rock bands. I'm a musician. That's my time. I never forfeited my right to play music throughout this entire journey. Um, but I think that everybody should keep something that is part of their own identity throughout the process and just nurture it. Nurture it, put money into it, put time into it, get better at it. And because you're going to need that outlet.
Definitely. Definitely. What is your support system like?
So, to be honest, I never really felt that I had a support system. I had a lot of really nice friends, but it was at the point that I got the parent support group that I realized that that is my support system. Talking to other parents who know what it's like is so important. Going to do yoga with them, taking trips to the zoo or to a Padre game, because if you go with your friends with normal functioning children, it's not going to be the same experience. Believe me, when they have
Right.
those meltdowns and you got to stop because there's a seizure and you got to wheel them out to care and like all this stuff, they don't have those type of problems. And so you go with people who will totally understand. I found I take outings like this. We do outings like this. And every time we bring in someone new, I find that the parent is constantly making excuses as they go throughout the day. And we're like, yeah, and we do this too, and by the
Right.
end of the day, they're like, huh, yeah, let's just have fun. I don't have to explain no more. That's what you want.
All right. What challenges have you faced in society with a child with special needs that someone without special needs wouldn't have? And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
In the very first chapter of the journey, I talk about wheelchair etiquette in a way. So the scene in the journey is that we are going through Pacific Beach to go meet up with Veronica, and everybody's like jumping in front of the wheelchair rather than stopping and letting us pass because they think if they hurry up and get out of the way, they're helping me. You're not. Like these are things you got to understand. You're forcing me to use my entire body to stop a wheelchair that holds a 120-pound kid. Stop doing that. Just pause for a minute. Take a breath. Check your
Right.
email. Let us pass. Do
The one
something
time,
else.
the one time, look at your phone and check your email. So go ahead and do that.
Just,
So,
yeah,
all right.
be
So these
nice.
questions, right? So these questions are coming from a special needs parent. How do you balance being a parent to a special needs child and a non-special needs child?
That's really hard. You have to get therapy right from the beginning because you will have a jealous sibling. If the older child does not have special needs, when the new one comes along, you are taking away energy, time, patience, especially patience from them. and giving it to the other child. You're asking them to do half the work. You know you are. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Because they're your built-in helper, right? But that weighs on the siblings. So I recommend that anybody who has a special needs child right away, get a family therapist, learn. This is very well studied, by the way, in academia. Learn ways that you can bring a higher family quality of life. And by the way, that is the topic of my dissertation.
Wow. How about that? That's awesome. So this question comes from several parents. How do you find a balance between pushing the special needs child to excel and reach their potential versus knowing when they've been pushed enough?
First of all, you want to make sure that you're relying on the professionals who have devoted years and years of education to making sure they know how to do that one thing, right? And at the same time, you want to be part of the team's decision making. So whether that's an IEP team, a medical team, a therapy team, an ABA team, you need to voice and advocate for your child. But don't be so protective that you miss the miracle, because some of these therapies really do produce amazing results. You do want to push your kids to an extent. When they start having outbursts of behavior and stuff like that, take a step back or maybe 2 steps back and then tiptoe back into place, right? You can find balance, but make sure that you're part of the team's decision making, no matter what team you're on.
All right. And that kind of leads in a little bit to our next question. What tips do you have regarding interacting with the school system while advocating for your child?
When you interact with the school system, you need to understand what they're there for. They're there for academics and to be able to teach some life skills, to make good citizens that can function in society, whether your child has special needs or are normal functioning. Those are the same guidelines for education. If you think that they're going to fix every little thing, then you're going to constantly be disappointed. So you need to be part of the IEP team. Understand that document. Even if you have a language barrier, or maybe you have the inability to understand the language that's in the IEP, because it could be pretty extensive, you need to ask a lot of questions. And I know sometimes people need to have an advocate. If you're not able to self-advocate for yourself, then you're probably not going to advocate as hard for your child. It is in that situation that you get someone to help you. But you do not have to pay outrageous fees for that. And that is something that bugs me. If someone's having a hard time and they want a little bit of help, they can reach out to our organization and we will give you as much free help as possible. And there are other organizations who will do that. But basically, I would say get to know that IEP document. Let me give you one example. This is really important. You want your child to have a one-on-one. Every single person in special ed wants their child to have a one-on-one, but is it necessary? Or can one aide cater to 4 children? That is what the school's dealing with. In my situation, I have a daughter that had seizures in school every day, and they still had not assigned her a one-on-one. I didn't know until I was already a teacher that you have to request what's called a supplemental assessment for services. It's buried deep in the IEP document. This is what I mean. You have to understand that document. If you check that box and make the IEP team sign it, and I want a supplemental assessment, and you don't back down, then they have to do one. Now, the school psychologist does the supplemental assessment, and they agreed Carly needs to have a one-on-one. But in your situation, it may not go your way, but at least you took the action and you went all the way up to the top of the ladder to get that answer.
All right. And we have one final question. Did you encounter difficulties or pushbacks from them that you had to overcome, and what was your takeaway from all of that?
I did. Like I was saying, when you try to share a success that you're seeing at home, I was getting Carly, for example, to write a big giant C, but it had to be something that was this big and not that big because of her lack of fine motor control. And I would say, she's writing C and then an A. They go, oh, we're not seeing that here. Okay, this is going to be a continuing theme, and you need to advocate, become a voice on that team. And each day, just try to be a team member rather than opposing. Okay, you can get a lot more done with sugar than you can, with acid.
All right.
Don't pour acid on the problem. Add a little bit of sugar and just stay on top of it and consistently push. And if anything does come up at school that you want to have addressed, ask for an amendment meeting. Amendment means that we're going to change the document now, and I want to meet, and they have to give it to you.
Wow. This has really been an amazing and educational conversation. Real quick, I know we've talked a lot about Carly. What's happening with Carly these days? She just celebrated a big milestone. Tell us about Carly and what's going on today.
She just turned 16 on Friday.
All right.
I wanted to have a sweet 16 party for her, but it had to be on her mental level, which is like age 3. And so we invited all of her classmates and friends and family for a Disney theme party. Had my band perform. We played her favorite songs, like the hot dog song at the end of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty, Let It Go from the movie Frozen, and then Girls Want to Have Fun and, some Blondie and stuff like that. And then we had Mickey Mouse show up.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it was quite amazing. All the kids had a lot of fun. We had pizza and crumble cookies, and it was the best Sweet 16 party I've ever been to. Hers was the best. But you know something? This was a huge milestone for her to get there, don't you think? From that little tiny baby having that first brain surgery to having a Sweet 16 birthday party. Every penny invested was worth it.
That's amazing. There's no doubt that, we sometimes don't understand while we're going through it, why we're going through it. But listening to your story, everything you had to overcome from childhood up to, being a special needs parent has led you to the point of being an advocate for other special needs children and also for other special needs parents, which based on all of our conversation is something that has been a lack of out there. And you have put that all together through the journey. Again, it's right here. It's the journey. It's an amazing book. Put it up there real quick. It didn't come up, but we'll make sure you get it. But it's really a book, a must-have book, just to look through it, to read it, and to understand a daily life of a special needs parents. And what's really amazing as we wrap things up, it's amazing to hear how many different diagnoses are coming out these days. Is that amazing to you?
Yeah. 1 in 6 children worldwide are diagnosed with some sort of disability. And they do pile, sight and hearing into that, but 1 in 6 is a big number.
Well, I know it's been educational, as I mentioned. Last word going out to you. First of all, I want to thank you very much for taking time to share your journey with us, to share Carly's journey with us as well. If there is a parent out there, maybe something we haven't touched on or anything like that, if there's a parent out there who maybe just now found out that they are a special needs parent today, what one thing would you leave them with from our conversation today?
Well, first of all, get the book. And second of all, you are not alone. And you will find that other parents are fierce warriors. And even though you feel like you need to be the one-man army because you don't want to share your vulnerability and you don't want to give off the impression that you're not strong enough to handle it, reach out to other parents who are also going through the same thing. Form a parent support group in your community. Be that voice. Because I can tell you right now, the reason I've gotten this far is because I keep on trying to be of service. And when you have that mentality, you feel like you have something to offer, you have something else to accomplish, then you're going to keep yourself built up to be that strong person that you are, the matriarch of your family, the leader, the patriarch of your family, the provider. And by forming alliances with other parents, you'll feel like you fit in and that you're supported and that you have someone that you can turn to. And if you need to get a copy of the 5-day action plan, you can contact me through carlyscause.org and I'll send you the full detailed copy, which is not the same as the one in the book. We give that out for free. And then I ask you to watch for that 10-week stabilization course. We will make those announcements on our website early 2026.
All right. Well, Sandi, I want to thank you again very much for sharing your experience with us and our audience. And it's really been delightful to get to know you, to understand the journey. And I wish you the continued success in your education aspect for what you're going after, but also for your expansion of services and needs for special needs parents and children.
Thank you for having me. And I really appreciate having a platform like yours to be able to discuss these very difficult topics. We are coming up on Giving Tuesday, and that is something, they have it backwards. They have Black Friday before Giving Tuesday. But I would hope that some of your listeners might keep Carly's Cause, and it's spelt like, Carly Simon, who I named her after. Carly's Cause, keep us in your hearts and maybe send a donation so we can reach some more parents. Really appreciate your support.
All right. Well, Sandi, again, thank you very much for joining us.
All right. Thank you.
All right. And we want to thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Eagle Freedom Presents. And just like Sandi, you too can rise, inspire, and overcome. We'll see you again on another edition of Eagle Freedom Presents.
To learn more about our mission and become a part of #Rio Movement, visit EagleFreedomPresents.com. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs a beacon of hope. If you know someone who has an amazing story of overcoming, send us an email to EagleFreedomPresents@gmail.com. And remember our mantra, rise, inspire, overcome. Podcast distribution for Eagle Freedom Presents provided by Podetize. Visit podetize.com for all your podcast needs.